The wind howled across the Ashcombe moors, battering Isabella Marlowe's thin cloak as she stepped from the rattling carriage. Grey clouds pressed low, and the scent of rain mingled with the sharp tang of autumn leaves. Above her loomed the great stone facade of Ashcombe Manor, windows like watching eyes, the iron knocker shaped like a lion's head. Isabella pressed trembling fingers to her bodice, steadying her breath. She could not falter, not now, not on the threshold of her new life. Inside, the entrance hall was vast and cold. Boots clicked on polished marble. A butler, tall and unsmiling, regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "Miss Marlowe, I presume? This way, if you please. Her Grace awaits." Her heart battered against her ribs as she was led past oil portraits, stern ancestors staring down, as if to warn her away. The hush of the house was oppressive, broken only by the muted tolling of a distant clock. In the drawing room, Lady Eleanor, Duchess of Ashcombe, sat stiffly in a high-backed chair, draped in widow's black. Silver hair framed a face chiseled by years of command. Her eyes were shards of ice, fixed on Isabella as she entered. "Miss Marlowe." The voice was crisp, precise, clipped of warmth. "You are punctual, at least. Sit." Isabella obeyed, smoothing her skirt to hide trembling hands. "Thank you, Your Grace." The Duchess appraised her like a hawk sizing up a sparrow. "You come to us with glowing references, yet I have learned to distrust such things. You are aware that Ashcombe has high expectations for those who instruct its young." "I understand, madam. I will do my utmost to serve." Lady Eleanor's hand cut the air. "Spare me platitudes. My son's well-being is paramount. I do not suffer fools, nor adventuresses. You will find Ashcombe exacting, Miss Marlowe." "Are you prepared for that?" Isabella met her gaze, voice steady though her heart trembled. "I am, Your Grace." A moment's silence stretched, taut as a drawn bow. Then the Duchess inclined her head ever so slightly. "We shall see. Mrs. Godwin will show you to your rooms." Dismissed, Isabella rose, knees weak. As she turned, she caught sight of a portrait above the hearth. A young man with dark hair and intelligent eyes, painted with a trace of melancholy. The ducal heir, Arthur. Mrs. Godwin, the housekeeper, appeared with a lantern and a pinched smile. "If you'll follow me, miss." Her voice, though soft, carried the authority of one who ruled below stairs. Corridors twisted like secrets through the manor. Servants glanced from doorways, some curious, others wary. In the attic wing, Mrs. Godwin paused before a modest chamber. "You'll find Ashcombe is not always as it seems. Her Grace expects much and forgives little. Best keep your wits about you." As Isabella unpacked her meager belongings, a young maid, Elsie, slipped in. "You're the new governess, then?" "Best mind the Duchess. Last girl, Miss Harper. She left in tears afore the month was out." Isabella forced a smile. "Thank you, Elsie. I shall endeavor not to disappoint." Elsie's eyes widened. "It's not just Her Grace, miss. There's rules, and then there's the tests. She sets traps, see little things, to catch you out. Forget a lesson, misplace a key, even look too long at the young master, she'll know." A shiver traced Isabella's spine. "Does the Duke?" Elsie blushed, ducking her head. "He's away most days, riding the estate. Kind enough, they say, but he keeps to himself. Her Grace's shadow, some call him." The bell for supper tolled, echoing through stone and silence. Isabella squared her shoulders, determination burning through her unease. She had survived worse than a duchess's scrutiny. Still, as she descended to the servants' hall, the weight of 100 eyes seen and unseen pressed upon her. In the flickering candlelight, whispers eddied. She felt their gaze, measuring, doubting. She was an outsider, and Ashcombe did not welcome strangers lightly. Yet as Isabella straightened her back and met their eyes, something fierce and stubborn rose within her. She would not let them see her fear. She would not fail. Upstairs, Lady Eleanor watched from her window, lips pressed thin. Below in the stables, a rider reined in, his horse dark eyes thoughtful, a letter from London crushed in his gloved hand. Night deepened over Ashcombe, shadows thickening in corners, secrets gathering like storm clouds. And Isabella Marlowe, alone in her narrow bed, whispered a silent vow to herself. Whatever trials awaited, she would endure. But as the wind rose again, rattling the panes, she could not help but wonder, what would the first test be? And would she recognize it before it was too late? Dawn broke over Ashcombe Manor in a hush of pewter light, mist curling along the lawns and seeping through the hedgerows. Isabella Marlowe stood at the schoolroom window, watching the morning unfurl, her hands folded tightly, knuckles pale. Below, the orphan children tumbled onto the frost-laced grass, laughter bright against the manor's silence. Their cheeks were pinched with cold and hope. Their eyes darted to the house, awaiting her call. She had begun her work with them only days before, and already she felt the weight of their futures settling on her shoulders. Most were thin, shy, and quick to please, aware their place here hung on the ducal whim. Lady Eleanor had taken them in, not out of sentiment but out of duty, a duchess's charity, exacting and unsentimental. In the schoolroom, Isabella drew the children close. She read to them from battered books, coaxed hesitant hands to form letters and numbers, and taught them the songs she had learned as a girl. She never raised her voice, even when tempers frayed or tears fell. Instead, she knelt beside the smallest ones, meeting their gaze with unwavering patience. Lady Eleanor appeared more often than necessary. She would stand in the doorway, a silent sentinel, her severe profile outlined against the light. She never interrupted, but Isabella felt her scrutiny with every word she uttered, every lesson given. "Miss Marlowe," the Duchess said one morning, her tone as crisp as the air, "the children are to recite the Beatitudes by Sunday. I expect them to be flawless. No exceptions." Isabella inclined her head. "Yes, Your Grace." "And Miss Marlowe," the Duchess added, eyes narrowing, "you will also see to their deportment. Their manners must be above reproach when the guests arrive." Isabella met her gaze without flinching. "I shall do my best, madam." After the Duchess swept from the room, Elsie crept in with a basket of bread and milk for the children. "She watches you like a hawk, miss," the maid whispered. "Never seen her so keen on a governess before." "I suspect she means to test me," Isabella replied softly, "in every possible way." Elsie's lips twitched. "Just don't let her catch you faltering." The next day, a flurry of activity heralded the Duke's return from London. Servants hurried along the corridors, polishing brass and laying fires in the grand chambers. Isabella glimpsed Arthur Ashcombe for the first time in the main hall, a tall, dark-haired man, his bearing marked by both fatigue and the effortless authority of his rank. He paused as she descended the staircase, and for a moment, their eyes met. Something in his expression, curiosity, perhaps, or weariness, caught her breath. He inclined his head with formal courtesy. "Miss Marlowe, I presume. I trust you are finding Ashcombe to your liking." His voice was gentle, yet distant, as if he stood behind an invisible wall. Isabella curtsied, her cheeks warming. "Yes, Your Grace, thank you." He offered no further word, only a faint smile before striding away, his boots echoing on the marble. Isabella watched him go, a tremor of restless admiration stirring within her. She sensed a gravity in him, a sorrow, carefully hidden. Later, in the schoolroom, Arthur entered unexpectedly. The children fell silent at once, eyes round with awe. The Duke regarded them, then turned to Isabella. "You have managed to coax them out of their shells," he said quietly. "That is no small feat." She hesitated, uncertain how much candor to risk. "They are eager to learn, Your Grace. They only needed someone to believe in them." He looked at her then, truly looked, and for a heartbeat the mask slipped. "Belief can be a rare gift in this house, Miss Marlowe. I hope you will find it repaid." But even as he spoke, Lady Eleanor appeared behind him, her gaze cool and appraising. "Arthur, I require a word. Miss Marlowe, do not let the children idle." With that, mother and son retreated, the air between them brittle as glass. The Duchess's tests grew more subtle and more taxing. One morning, Isabella found the lesson plans she had so carefully prepared missing from her desk. The next, a page was torn from the children's Bible. When she reported the mishaps, Lady Eleanor's brows arched in mild surprise. "Perhaps you are not as organized as you thought, Miss Marlowe. It would be a shame if the children suffered for your oversights." Isabella bit back her protest. She spent long hours after the children slept, rewriting lessons by candlelight, determined to let nothing falter. Her trials did not go unnoticed below stairs. Mrs. Godwin pulled her aside in the corridor one evening, voice low. "You'll need a stronger spine than most to last here, miss. Her Grace has run off better than you." Isabella straightened. "I am not so easily run off, Mrs. Godwin." The housekeeper's lips curled in a rare smile. "We shall see, child. With the arrival of Lady Eleanor's guests, Ashcombe thrummed with brittle laughter and the rustle of silks. The drawing rooms filled with well-fed men and women who eyed Isabella as though she were some curious artifact, a governess with the manners of a lady, yet the plain dress of her station. At dinner, Isabella took her meal in the servants' hall, but was summoned one afternoon to assist the Duchess during tea. She poured and served, every motion observed and dissected by the company. "My dear Lady Eleanor," drawled Lady Westbridge, a dowager with a voice like sugared vinegar, "wherever did you find such a pretty, solemn governess? She must have noble blood, to judge by her posture." Lady Eleanor's eyes flickered. "Miss Marlowe is of respectable birth, no more. Yet I find she manages the children tolerably well." Another guest, Lord Harcourt, fixed Isabella with a lazy smile. "And what does Miss Marlowe think of country life? Is it not a trifle dull after the excitements of the city?" Isabella met his gaze without wavering. "On the contrary, my lord, I find purpose in useful employment. The children's progress is reward enough for me." A ripple of amusement ran through the guests, but Lady Eleanor's lips tightened as if Isabella had overstepped. The scrutiny was relentless, the undertone clear. She was not one of them, and never would be. Arthur entered then, pausing at the threshold as conversation ebbed. "Isabella," he said, her name a soft note amid the brittle chatter. "The children request your presence for their recitation." She excused herself, relief warming her cheeks. In the corridor, Arthur lingered. "You handled them admirably," he murmured. "It cannot be easy." She hesitated, searching his eyes. "It is not, but I will not let them, or myself, be diminished." He nodded, and for an instant the reserve between them lessened. "If you ever require help, Miss Marlowe, you need only ask." She watched him go, her heart unsettled by the promise in his words. The days blurred, each marked by new tasks. The children's lessons, the Duchess's challenges, the subtle hostility of the guests. Yet Isabella endured, her dignity intact, her patience unbroken. The children clung to her, and even the servants began to regard her with cautious respect. On Sunday, the orphan stood before the assembled guests and recited the Beatitudes without flaw. Lady Eleanor's eyes softened, just for a moment, as Isabella stood behind them, pride warring with exhaustion. But the tension in the house lingered, taut as a wire. In every glance, every whispered word, Isabella felt the judgment of her birth, the unspoken warning that she would always be an outsider at Ashcombe. As evening fell, she retreated to her room, the echoes of applause and ridicule still ringing in her ears. She wondered how long she could endure the Duchess's scrutiny, the social barbs, the impossible expectations. Yet even as doubt gnawed at her, a stubborn hope refused to yield. For somewhere in the manor's silent corridors, she sensed the shifting of old secrets, the stirrings of something that might yet change everything. And as the candle guttered low, Isabella whispered a silent vow. She would not be broken not by Lady Eleanor, nor by the world that scorned her origins. But she could not know that her greatest test, and the most perilous temptation, was yet to come. 1,000 candles flickered in the great hall of Ashcombe Manor, their golden light glancing off crystal and silver, catching in the folds of velvet gowns and the bright eyes of the assembled gentry. The air shimmered with music and laughter. Yet Isabella Marlowe stood at the edge of it all, a shadow at the heart of the revelry. She wore her best muslin, simple and pale, a stark contrast to the opulent silk swirling around her. Her heart thudded in her chest, but she held her chin high, determined not to betray the tremor beneath her calm. At Lady Eleanor's command, Isabella had been summoned to the gala dinner, not as a guest, but as a visible symbol of Ashcombe's charitable virtue. Her presence, the Duchess had said, would remind certain parties of our obligations. The words had stung, but Isabella had accepted, knowing she must endure whatever the night might bring. As the guests filed into the dining room, Isabella found herself seated at the very end of the long table, between a stony-faced vicar and a young girl too shy to speak. Across the gleaming expanse of linen, the nobility glittered, none more dazzling than Lady Charlotte, Arthur's cousin, whose laughter danced like broken glass. Lady Charlotte was beautiful, with eyes the color of new leaves and hair coiled in elaborate braids. She commanded attention as if born to it, her voice effortlessly carrying over the clink of goblets. "Do tell us, Miss Marlowe," Lady Charlotte called down the table, her tone honeyed and sharp. "How do you find your position here at Ashcombe? It must be quite an elevation from where did you say you were from? Some obscure parish, was it not?" A ripple of amusement fluttered among the guests. Isabella felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She steadied herself, meeting Lady Charlotte's gaze. "I am grateful to be of service, my lady. The children are a credit to the house." Lady Charlotte's lips curved in a sly smile. "So modest. But tell me, do you not aspire to more? It is said that Ashcombe is a house of opportunities for those bold enough to seize them." Arthur, seated 2 places away, stilled his fork. His eyes flicked to Isabella, his expression unreadable. "I aspire only to fulfill my duties," Isabella replied, her voice even. "Ambition has little place in my work." "Oh, come now," Lady Charlotte pressed, her green eyes bright with mischief. "Surely a girl as clever as you must dream of something finer. A governess today, who knows what tomorrow may bring? The world is not always so closed to those who cultivate the right connections." A sharper laugh rose from the guests. Someone murmured, "Climbing the ladder, is she?" The words cut through Isabella, raw and humiliating. Before she could muster a reply, Arthur's voice intervened, smooth and measured. "Lady Charlotte, I believe Miss Marlowe's devotion speaks for itself. Ashcombe has been fortunate to benefit from her talents, though not all can appreciate the virtues of humility and perseverance." A hush fell, the rebuke subtle but unmistakable. Lady Charlotte's smile faltered, her gaze sliding from Arthur to Isabella. "Of course, cousin," she said, voice tight. "How remiss of me." Lady Eleanor's eyes narrowed, taking in every nuance. Her fingers tapped once against her wineglass, contemplative, perhaps even troubled. The meal continued, but Isabella tasted little of it. Words echoed in her mind, each syllable a fresh bruise. She kept her posture rigid, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on her plate. Yet she would not let them see her wounded. She would not give Lady Charlotte or any of them the satisfaction. After the final course, Isabella excused herself on the pretext of attending to the children. She moved swiftly through the corridors, her shoes muffled on the carpets, her composure cracking only when the music and laughter faded behind closed doors. In the dim passage outside the kitchens, she paused, pressing her palm to the cool stone. Tears pricked her eyes, but she forced them back. Dignity was all she had left, and she would cling to it with the last of her strength. A quiet cough drew her attention. Mrs. Godwin, the housekeeper, stood nearby, her expression unusually soft. "You carried yourself well, miss," she said. "There's not many who could have done the same." Isabella managed a wan smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Godwin. I only wish I could have disappeared entirely." The older woman shook her head. "Those who make you feel small are rarely as grand as they believe. The staff noticed your grace. That counts for more than you think." A few maids, lingering in the shadows, nodded in silent agreement. Even the footman, Thomas, touched his brow in quiet respect as Isabella passed. Later that evening, Arthur lingered in the library, a book unread in his lap. He replayed the dinner in his mind, Charlotte's taunts, Isabella's composure, the stifling etiquette of the room. He had seen the hurt in Isabella's eyes, the flicker of pain quickly masked by pride. Guilt pricked him. He should have done more. Yet even his subtle defense had drawn a line between them, one the world would not ignore. He closed his eyes, recalling the way she had straightened her shoulders, refusing to bend. There was strength in her, he realized, an integrity that shamed the petty cruelties of his own circle. For the first time, he wondered what it would mean to truly know her, beyond the boundaries of class and duty. Meanwhile, Lady Eleanor sat in her private parlor, her embroidery forgotten. She weighed the night's events, the resilience in Isabella's bearing, the silent approval of the staff, her son's quiet intervention. Could the girl withstand the relentless pressure of their world? Or would she, like so many before her, be driven away? In the hush of the servants' quarters, Isabella found solace among those who worked in the margins, away from the gaze of nobility. Their nods and murmured encouragements offered a balm no grand hall could provide. She retired to her room, heart bruised but spirit unbroken. The manor's corridors hummed with rumors, but a subtle shift had begun, one that even Lady Eleanor could not ignore. Respect, hard-earned and quietly given, gathered around Isabella, like a shield. Yet as the night deepened, new tensions brewed unspoken, dangerous and impossible to ignore. Arthur found his thoughts returning to Isabella, drawn by a fascination he could no longer dismiss. And beneath Ashcombe's gilded surface, the fragile peace trembled, ready to shatter at the first sign of forbidden longing. The morning sunlight crept over Ashcombe's eastern wing, painting Isabella's writing desk in hues of honey and gold. She sat hunched over a sheaf of notepaper, her brow furrowed, pen poised above an ever-growing list. Sleep had eluded her for days, her mind tangled with the monumental task the Duchess had set before her, a literary evening for the county's most distinguished families. It was a command disguised as an opportunity, and all of Ashcombe seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to fail. It had begun with a summons to Lady Eleanor's private sitting room. The Duchess sat by the window, the morning's correspondence arrayed like a fortress at her elbow. Without preamble, she addressed Isabella. "You are to organize a soirée, Miss Marlowe. Ashcombe has long been known for its refinement. We shall not permit that reputation to languish. The event is in 1 week. You will select the readings, arrange the music, and ensure the guests' comfort. I trust you are equal to the task." The words were sharp, but Isabella detected a flicker of challenge beneath them, an expectation, perhaps, that she would falter under the weight of responsibility. She straightened her shoulders, summoning her courage. "I will do my utmost, Your Grace." Lady Eleanor's mouth tightened, neither approving nor dismissing. "See that you do." From that moment, Isabella's days became a whirl of activity. She pored over the library's vast collection, selecting passages from Shakespeare and Wordsworth, Austen and Byron. She arranged for the children to recite poetry and the house's small orchestra to prepare a medley of gentle airs. She fretted over seating charts, candle placements, and the endless, intricate etiquette of the gentry. Every detail, she knew, would be scrutinized. The servants watched her with wary respect. Elsie and Thomas ferried notes to neighboring estates. Mrs. Godwin offered practical advice on the arrangement of the drawing rooms. Even the children sensed the importance of the occasion, practicing their lines with nervous zeal. One afternoon, as Isabella struggled to resolve a particularly thorny dispute about which guest should be seated closest to Lady Westbridge, Arthur found her in the library, surrounded by open volumes and scraps of parchment. "You look as though you're preparing for battle," he observed, a glimmer of humor in his eyes. Isabella glanced up, exhaustion written in the set of her shoulders. "It rather feels that way, Your Grace. I confess I did not imagine so many rules could exist for an evening's amusement." He approached, his presence warm and steady. "The rules are designed to keep everyone in their proper place. But sometimes, the best evenings are those that break from tradition." She offered a tentative smile. "I fear I have little choice but to follow them." Arthur hesitated, then lowered his voice. "If you require assistance, you have only to ask. I have endured more than a few of my mother's gatherings. I know where the traps lie." Isabella's lips parted in surprise. "You would help me?" He shrugged, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "I am not as heartless as some may think. Besides, I find myself curious. I wish to see what you will make of this." Gratitude flickered in her eyes. "Thank you, Your Grace. I would be glad of your guidance." From then on, Arthur became her unlikely ally. He explained the subtle rivalries that simmered beneath polite conversation, the old grievances that shaped seating plans and guest lists. He suggested inviting a promising young poet from the village and arranged for a local quartet to play during the interval. Together, they pored over menus and debated the merits of various recitations. Their partnership was tentative at first, marked by formality and caution. But as the days passed, a quiet camaraderie bloomed between them. On the evening of the soirée, Ashcombe's halls glowed with candlelight. Servants bustled through the corridors, bearing trays of syllabub and wine, arranging chairs and polishing silver until it gleamed. The drawing room was transformed, a stage erected for the children's recitations, the grand piano tuned to a perfect pitch. Guests began to arrive in a flurry of silk and satin, their laughter bright and brittle. Lady Eleanor presided at the center, her gaze cool and inscrutable, while Lady Charlotte flitted from group to group, searching for an opportunity to pounce. Isabella, standing just behind the Duchess, felt her heart race as the clock struck 8. She greeted each guest with composure, her voice steady, her smile unwavering. Yet inside, she trembled, haunted by the fear of a single misstep. The evening unfolded with a delicate tension. The children's recitations were met with polite applause, the poetry readings with murmurs of approval. The village poet's verses, raw and heartfelt, drew unexpected admiration from the assembly. Between each performance, Isabella moved quietly among the guests, attending to their comfort, smoothing ruffled feathers, and diffusing small quarrels before they could ignite. Arthur was never far from her side. He steered conversation away from potential embarrassments, lent his presence to quell Lady Charlotte's barbed remarks, and ensured that no guest felt slighted. More than once, Isabella caught his gaze across the room, an unspoken encouragement that bolstered her flagging spirits. Midway through the evening, disaster threatened. The quartet's lead violinist was taken ill, leaving the musicians in disarray. Isabella's heart lurched, but Arthur intervened smoothly. "May I?" he murmured, taking the place of the absent violinist. His playing was deft and sure, the music soaring and sweet, transforming what might have been a catastrophe into the night's highlight. The guests listened in rapt attention, and when the final notes faded, applause thundered through the hall. Lady Eleanor watched from her seat, her expression unreadable. Yet for a fleeting moment, Isabella thought she glimpsed a shadow of surprise, perhaps even reluctant admiration in the Duchess's eyes. As the last guests departed, the air shimmered with a sense of triumph. The literary evening had not merely succeeded, it had enchanted. Even Lady Westbridge, never quick with praise, declared it a refreshing novelty in these dull country months. Exhausted yet exhilarated, Isabella lingered in the library after the last chairs were stacked and the children tucked into bed. Arthur entered quietly, the glow of the evening still bright in his eyes. "You have given Ashcombe something it has not known for years, a sense of delight," he said softly. Isabella met his gaze, her own eyes shining. "I could not have done it alone. Your guidance was invaluable." He smiled, a warmth in his expression that unsettled and comforted her in equal measure. "You underestimate yourself, Miss Marlowe. You possess a strength that few can match. My mother did not expect you to succeed." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Perhaps I was foolish to try. I know how precarious my place is here." Arthur's smile faded, replaced by a quiet gravity. "Precarious, yes. But you have altered something tonight. My mother will not admit it, but she is beginning to doubt her certainties." They stood in companionable silence, the vast library cocooning them from the world outside. Rain tapped softly at the windows, the storm that had threatened all evening finally breaking. After a moment, Isabella asked, "Do you ever wish for something beyond duty, Your Grace?" "Beyond Ashcombe and all it requires of you." He was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the rain-streaked glass. "I do. There are days when I long to escape the expectations, the endless performance, but I have never known how." She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I understand. I have dreams too, though I scarcely dare to name them." He looked at her then, truly seeing her, the hope and yearning in her eyes, the courage she tried so hard to hide. "Perhaps in time, you will." A subtle current passed between them, unspoken but undeniable, a quiet understanding. A bond forged in adversity and shared longing. The library's clock chimed midnight. Isabella gathered her things, suddenly aware of how close they stood. She dipped a curtsy, her cheeks flushed. "Good night, Your Grace." "Good night, Isabella," he replied, his voice rich with something that felt almost like promise. She slipped into the corridor, her steps light despite the hour. Behind her, Arthur watched her go, his heart caught between duty and desire, the seeds of something dangerous and beautiful beginning to stir. Upstairs, Lady Eleanor sat alone by her fire, the embers throwing her profile into sharp relief. She replayed the night's events, the laughter, the music, the unexpected harmony. Doubt crept into her thoughts, unsettling the certainties she had held for so long. Yet Ashcombe was a house of tradition, and tradition was not easily unseated. The future, for all its promise, remained uncertain. And as Isabella lay awake in her narrow bed, the memory of Arthur's gentle words echoing in her mind, she could not help but wonder what further trials and what deeper joys awaited her in the shadowed halls of Ashcombe Manor. Ashcombe Manor seemed to hum with whispers. They drifted through the corridors, threaded between candlelit suppers and morning walks, catching on the edges of conversations before melting into silence at the sound of approaching footsteps. Isabella Marlowe felt them like a chill at her back, sharp, insinuating, impossible to ignore. She noticed the way Lady Charlotte watched her, eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a knowing smile whenever Arthur lingered a moment too long in the schoolroom or paused to speak to Isabella in the gardens. Even the servants, loyal as they were, exchanged glances when Isabella's name was spoken in the same breath as the Duke's. The laughter of the children could not drown out the growing current beneath the surface of Ashcombe's daily life. Lady Eleanor, more vigilant than ever, summoned Isabella one crisp morning to her study. The Duchess's voice was clipped, her gaze cutting. "Miss Marlowe, it has come to my attention that your presence is much remarked upon. I trust you are aware of your position and of the dangers that arise when boundaries are blurred." Isabella's chin lifted. "I am, Your Grace. I have always endeavored to maintain the highest propriety." "See that you continue to do so," Lady Eleanor replied, her tone leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Ashcombe does not suffer impropriety, nor ambition disguised as innocence." Isabella bowed her head, her heart pounding. The interview left her shaken, but her resolve remained unbroken. She would not let rumors define her, nor would she give the Duchess cause to doubt her integrity. Yet, fate was not content to let things rest. That afternoon, a breathless messenger arrived from the village, muddy boots leaving tracks on the marble floor. "It's Tommy Wilkes, miss. He's taken ill. The fever's bad. His mother begs for help. Says you're the only one she trusts." Lady Eleanor's brow arched. "Miss Marlowe, I cannot spare you from your duties here for every village misfortune." Isabella's voice was gentle but firm. "With your permission, Your Grace, I cannot ignore Mrs. Wilkes' plea. The child is one of your dependents." The Duchess hesitated, then waved her hand in reluctant assent. "Very well. But you will not go alone. Arthur will accompany you, for safety and propriety's sake." Arthur's presence beside Isabella, as they rode through the misty lanes, was both comfort and complication. The air between them was tense with unspoken words, the rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves a steady counterpoint to their thoughts. At the Wilkes cottage, Isabella knelt by the child's bedside. Tommy's breath came in ragged bursts, his skin hot and damp. Mrs. Wilkes, exhausted, wrung her hands. "He's never been so poorly, miss." "I don't know what to do." Isabella pressed a cool cloth to the boy's brow, her voice soothing. "We'll need fresh water, and laudanum if you have it. Open the window a little for air. Arthur, would you fetch more firewood? He mustn't catch a chill." Arthur obeyed without hesitation, his usual reserve softened by worry. He watched as Isabella worked, mixing a poultice, coaxing Tommy to sip broth, murmuring encouragements through the long, feverish night. She seemed tireless, her hands steady, her manner both gentle and commanding. Hours passed. Mrs. Wilkes dozed in a chair, while Arthur kept silent vigil in the corner, watching Isabella's every move. At dawn, the child's fever broke. Isabella sat back, exhaustion etched into her features, but her eyes shone with relief. "He'll recover now," she whispered, smoothing Tommy's hair. "He's past the worst of it." Arthur knelt beside her, his voice low and sincere. "You are remarkable, Miss Marlowe. I have never seen such courage or such kindness." Isabella met his gaze, a flush rising in her cheeks. "I did only what anyone would have done." He shook his head gently. "No, not anyone. Ashcombe is fortunate to have you." For a moment, the space between them seemed to shrink, filled with gratitude and something deeper, more dangerous. Isabella looked away, aware of her own heart's betrayal. They returned to the manor in silence, the early light gilding the fields. Lady Eleanor was waiting in the entrance hall, her posture as rigid as ever. She regarded Isabella with a searching stare, noting the fatigue in her eyes, the mud on her hem, the quiet pride in her bearing. "And the child?" she asked. "Out of danger, Your Grace," Isabella replied. The Duchess paused. "I am relieved. You have done your duty beyond expectation." Her words were stiff, but there was an unfamiliar note beneath them, something almost like respect. Arthur stood at his mother's side, a silent witness. He saw the way Lady Eleanor's gaze lingered on Isabella, the reluctant admiration in her eyes. He felt a surge of protectiveness and something more, an admiration that was rapidly deepening into affection. In the days that followed, the rumors at Ashcombe did not cease. If anything, they grew louder. Yet among the servants, Isabella's reputation soared. Mrs. Godwin pressed her hand in quiet gratitude. Elsie and Thomas recounted the tale of her bravery with shining eyes. Even Lady Eleanor, though outwardly unchanged, began to question the prejudices she had harbored for so long. For Isabella, the ordeal left her changed. She had faced suspicion, accusation, and the peril of another's life and emerged stronger. Arthur's regard warmed her through the coldest glances, his words echoing in her mind long after they parted. But neither of them could ignore the boundaries that remained, nor the storm that threatened beyond the walls of Ashcombe. For as Isabella gazed from her window at the distant village, she knew that the greatest tests still awaited, and that the heart's desires could be the most perilous trials of all. A thunderstorm gathered over Ashcombe, its clouds bruised and heavy, pressing the manor into uneasy silence. Inside, the air was taut, every footstep echoing with the promise of disaster. Isabella sensed the change before the news reached her. The servants' glances grew wary. Conversation stilled when she entered a room, and even the children seemed subdued, watching her with anxious eyes. The scandal broke at breakfast. Lady Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her face pale and set, a single sheet of paper trembling in her hand. Arthur entered late, his riding coat spattered with rain, and found the household gathered in a tableau of tension. The letter, unsigned and cruel, had arrived by morning post. Lady Eleanor's voice cut the hush. "Miss Marlowe, you will remain after breakfast." Isabella's hands shook as she poured tea, the whispers of the guests stinging her ears. She could not meet Arthur's gaze, nor could she swallow the fear rising in her throat. When the last plate was cleared, Lady Eleanor led her to the study, closing the door with a finality that made Isabella's heart falter. The Duchess faced her across the desk, the letter spread between them like a blade. "You are aware, I presume, of the gravity of this accusation." Isabella found her voice, though it sounded foreign to her own ears. "No, Your Grace. I do not know of what I am accused." Lady Eleanor's eyes were hard. "This letter charges you with conduct unbecoming a gentlewoman, suggesting impropriety, even manipulation. It alleges that you have sought to entrap my son with designs upon the title and fortune of Ashcombe. Is there any truth in this?" Shock and humiliation washed over Isabella. Her hands twisted in her lap. "None, madam. I swear it upon all I hold dear. I have never harbored such intentions, nor have I acted in any way that could justify such a claim." The Duchess's lips pressed thin. "Rumor alone can destroy a reputation in this world, Miss Marlowe. I must consider the welfare of my household and my son." Tears pricked Isabella's eyes, but she forced herself to remain upright. "I have given my loyalty and my best efforts to Ashcombe. If I am unwelcome, I will leave at once." Before Lady Eleanor could reply, the door burst open. Arthur strode in, eyes blazing with anger. "Mother, this is monstrous. You cannot believe Isabella capable of such duplicity." Lady Eleanor's voice was cold. "Arthur, you will not interfere." "I must," he interrupted, his tone trembling with outrage. "This accusation is a lie. I have witnessed Isabella's integrity, her selflessness, her devotion to the children and the house. She has shown only honor." His words hung in the air, heavy with conviction. Lady Eleanor regarded him for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. "Your feelings are noted, Arthur, but feelings do not refute evidence." Arthur turned to Isabella, his voice gentler. "Isabella, tell me, Do you know who would do this? Who could bear you such malice? She shook her head, tears finally spilling over. I do not know. I have tried to harm no one, but it seems I do not belong here after all. Arthur's jaw tightened. If you leave, Ashcombe will lose its conscience. I will not allow it. Isabella fled the study before she could betray herself further. She hurried down the corridor, the walls pressing close, her vision blurred by tears. She found solace in the schoolroom, where the children clustered about her, sensing her distress. Their small hands sought hers, their voices pleading, "Don't go, Miss Marlowe. Please don't leave us." She held them close, her heart breaking. Meanwhile, Lady Eleanor sat alone in her study, the letter in her hand. Doubt gnawed at her certainty. She recalled Isabella's steadfastness, the respect she had earned from staff and villagers alike, the quiet dignity with which she had borne every trial. Was it possible that she had misjudged her? That envy or spite, rather than truth, had inspired the accusation? Restless, Lady Eleanor summoned Mrs. Godwin. "Who was in the breakfast room this morning before the post arrived?" The housekeeper answered promptly. "Only Lady Charlotte, Your Grace. She mentioned she was searching for her embroidery, but I saw no such thing." Lady Eleanor's brow furrowed. "And has Lady Charlotte ever expressed reservations about Miss Marlowe?" Mrs. Godwin hesitated. "She has not been shy with her opinions, madam. Some say she resents the attention the Duke has paid the governess." Dismissed, Mrs. Godwin departed, leaving the Duchess to her thoughts. Lady Eleanor weighed the evidence, the timing, the tone of the letter, the subtle venom only a woman of Charlotte's wit could wield. The conclusion dawned with a chill certainty. Later that day, Lady Eleanor found her niece in the music room, her fingers trilling over the pianoforte keys. Lady Charlotte looked up, a smile curving her lips. "Aunt, you look pale. Is all well?" The Duchess's voice was steel. "Spare me, Charlotte. I know you wrote the letter." Lady Charlotte's hands froze on the keys. For a moment she tried to brazen it out, but the Duchess's gaze pinned her in place. Color flared in Charlotte's cheeks, anger and shame warring in her eyes. "Why?" Lady Eleanor demanded. Charlotte's voice was cold. "Because she does not belong here. Because she has bewitched Arthur and you are too blind to see it. She will ruin us." Lady Eleanor's reply was measured. "You have ruined only yourself. Your conduct is beneath the dignity of this house." Charlotte's composure crumbled. "You cannot let her stay. She will take everything." The Duchess's face softened, just a fraction. "You are mistaken. It is not birth that defines us, but character. And Miss Marlowe's is beyond reproach." She turned and left Charlotte trembling at the pianoforte, the final notes of her rebellion fading into silence. That evening, Lady Eleanor sent for Isabella. The young woman entered the study, face pale but resolute. Arthur was already there, hovering protectively by the fire. The Duchess gestured for Isabella to sit. "Miss Marlowe, I have discovered the origin of the accusation. You are exonerated. The letter was a fabrication, an act of jealousy, not justice." Isabella's relief was palpable, but exhaustion dulled its sweetness. "Thank you, Your Grace. I do not know if I can remain, knowing how easily my reputation may be destroyed." Lady Eleanor's voice for once was gentle. "I misjudged you, Miss Marlowe. I have seen enough to know your worth. Ashcombe would suffer for your absence." Arthur stepped forward, his gaze steady and earnest. "We all would." For a long moment, the three of them stood suspended in the flickering light. Old enmities and new understandings weaving an uneasy truce. When Isabella returned to her room, the storm outside had broken, rain lashing the windows, thunder rolling across the moors. She sat by the candle's glow, her heart battered but still whole, and wondered at the strange mercy that had brought her through yet another trial. Yet in the hush that followed, both the Duchess and the governess sensed that the true test, the one that would challenge not only their prejudices, but the very future of Ashcombe, still lay ahead. The skies above Ashcombe cleared at last, leaving behind a vivid blue that seemed to sweep away the memory of the storm and scandal alike. The manor, so recently heavy with suspicion, breathed anew as the truth of Lady Charlotte's malice became common knowledge. For the first time in many weeks, Isabella Marlowe walked the corridors without the weight of unseen eyes. Her head held higher, her step lighter. Lady Eleanor made the matter public in her own precise way. At a tea attended by the principal families of the county, she stood, glass in hand, and addressed the assembly. "There has been talk," she declared, her voice cool yet resolute, "regarding Miss Marlowe's character. I wish to make it plain. Those rumors were false, the result of envy and youthful folly. Miss Marlowe remains in my household with my full confidence." A hush fell, then a ripple of polite approval. Isabella, standing near the window, felt the tide turn at last. The guests approached her with measured civility, some with genuine warmth. The children, emboldened by her vindication, clung to her skirts, while even the most reserved of the servants now greeted her with respect. The poison of doubt had been drawn, and Isabella was herself again, though marked, perhaps, by a new understanding of the fragility of reputation. Arthur, too, was changed. No longer did he cloak himself in formality when he addressed her. Their conversations grew softer, edged with laughter and shared confidences. On a golden afternoon, they walked together in the rose garden. The world hushed but for the song of bees and the distant cries of children at play. Arthur broke the silence, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I cannot forget what nearly befell you, Isabella. I find myself angry, still, that you were so wronged." She glanced at him, her eyes bright with gratitude. "It is past, Your Grace. I survived, and I am stronger for it. But I am grateful for your faith in me, when I could not find it in myself." He stopped beside a flowering arch, the sunlight catching in his hair. "It is not faith, Isabella. It is knowledge. I have seen you, your courage, your kindness. I have never known anyone like you." The words hung between them, fragile and electric. Isabella, caught off guard, felt her composure slip. "You give me too much credit, sir." He shook his head, stepping closer. "Not enough, I think." In that moment, both seemed to sense the precipice on which they stood, the impossible gulf between their stations, and the undeniable longing that bridged it. Arthur's hand hovered near hers as if drawn by gravity, but he did not touch her. Instead, he offered a crooked smile and turned the conversation to the children's lessons, leaving the air shimmering with all that had gone unspoken. The days that followed were marked by small, intimate moments. A book exchanged in the library, a shared glance across the supper table, a conversation at dusk about dreams long hidden. Arthur grew ever more attentive, seeking out Isabella's company, asking her opinions on estate matters, and confiding his own fears and hopes. In these moments, the distance imposed by rank seemed to dissolve, leaving only two souls discovering each other's depths. Yet even as a quiet happiness took root, Lady Eleanor watched from the shadows, her mind working with the precision of one accustomed to command. She had seen Isabella's strength, her refusal to yield to false accusation or adversity. But one question remained. Was the girl's loyalty to Ashcombe and to her son born of genuine feeling, or merely the calculation of one who saw an advantage to be gained? The Duchess decided upon a final test. On a cool morning, Isabella was summoned to Lady Eleanor's private sitting room. The chamber was filled with soft light and the scent of lavender. The Duchess, composed and unreadable, gestured for her to sit. "Miss Marlowe," she began, "you have endured much since your arrival. Few in your position would have remained. I am prepared to offer you an alternative." She slid an envelope across the polished table. "This contains a letter of recommendation, glowing, as you deserve, and a sum of money, more than enough to secure your comfort elsewhere. You may leave Ashcombe free of scandal, with your future assured." Isabella stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. The offer was tempting, freedom from scrutiny, from rumor, from the daily trials of a house that had never fully embraced her. The promise of comfort beckoned, yet she felt only a hollow ache at the thought of leaving. She raised her eyes to the Duchess. "Why, Your Grace?" Lady Eleanor's expression did not flicker. "You have served this house well. You deserve the chance to begin anew, unburdened by the past. And perhaps," she added, voice softer, "to prove to myself that my faith in you is not misplaced." Isabella's answer was quiet but unwavering. "I'm grateful for your generosity, madam, but I cannot accept. My loyalty cannot be bought, nor my integrity weighed against comfort. Ashcombe has tested me, yes, but it has also given me purpose. If you wish me gone, I will go with nothing, but I will not sell my dignity for security." A long silence followed, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Lady Eleanor regarded her with something like awe, a grudging admiration that softened the lines of her face. "Very well, Miss Marlowe. You may remain, if that is your wish." "It is, Your Grace." The Duchess inclined her head. "Then let it be so." Isabella left the room, her spirit steady, her heart strangely light. She had passed the final, most perilous test, not merely of her place in the house, but of her own self-worth. Word of her decision spread quickly among the servants, and their respect deepened into a quiet reverence. Arthur found her that evening in the library, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the pages of a novel. He knelt beside her chair, searching her face. "You stayed," he whispered, relief and wonder mingling in his voice. She managed a smile. "I could not have done otherwise." He took her hand then, at last, and held it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. In that moment, all doubts and fears seemed to fall away, leaving only the fragile promise of something new and extraordinary. Yet neither could know what trials the future still held, nor how the world beyond Ashcombe's gates might conspire to test the fragile happiness they had begun to find. As the candles burned low and the night settled around them, both felt the stirrings of hope and the shadow of fate, waiting just beyond the dawn. A restless wind swept across the Ashcombe grounds, rattling the leaded windows and stirring the ancient yews into uneasy murmurs. Within the manor, the air felt charged, as if the house itself braced for a reckoning. Isabella Marlowe sensed the tension with every breath, though she could not yet name its source. In the days since she had refused Lady Eleanor's tempting offer, she and Arthur had found themselves thrown together more often, their shared glances lingering, their silences laden with things unsaid. It was on one such afternoon, as golden sunlight slanted through the walled garden, that Arthur found her among the late-blooming roses. He hesitated at the edge of the path, uncertainty writ across his usually assured features. Isabella, kneeling with a trowel in hand, looked up as his shadow fell over her. He cleared his throat. "You always seem to bring life to whatever you touch, Isabella." She smiled faintly, brushing soil from her hands. "Flowers are more forgiving than people, Your Grace. They thrive with kindness." He crouched beside her, the scent of earth and petals curling between them. "Isabella, I must speak plainly, before I lose my nerve. I cannot pretend any longer that my feelings are mere friendship. I have tried, but every hour spent in your company convinces me otherwise." She drew back, eyes wide with apprehension. "Arthur," he pressed on, voice low and urgent. "I love you, Isabella. Not as a passing fancy, nor as an indulgence. I love you as I never thought I could love anyone. I cannot imagine Ashcombe or my life without you." A silence stretched, heavy with emotion. Isabella's hands trembled in her lap. She wanted to believe, to surrender to the warmth in his eyes, but fear tugged at her heart. She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. "You must not say such things. You are the Duke of Ashcombe. I am no one. The difference between us is not so easily bridged, no matter what we feel." Arthur's jaw tightened. "You are everything to me. If only you could see yourself as I do." She shook her head, blinking back tears. "Your family, your mother, she would never accept it. Nor would society. I have seen what happens to those who overreach their place." He reached for her hand, but she stepped away, her resolve brittle. "Please, Arthur, I cannot bear to be the cause of your regret." He let her go, anguish in his eyes. "There is no regret in loving you, only in being unable to convince you to believe it." From the upper window, Lady Eleanor watched the scene unfold, her expression unreadable. She saw the pain in her son's face, the turmoil in Isabella's. It unsettled her, this entanglement so powerful, so honest, and yet so fraught with peril. Her musings were interrupted by the arrival of her solicitor, Mr. Pembroke, bearing grim news. Within the hour, the crisis that had been simmering beneath Ashcombe's placid surface erupted. A failed investment, compounded by a dishonest steward, threatened to unravel the estate's finances. The Duchess's hands shook as she read the balance sheets. "We are ruined," she whispered, voice barely audible. Arthur, summoned at once, absorbed the news with quiet determination. "We will not be ruined, mother. Ashcombe has weathered worse. But not with debts such as these," she replied, her composure faltering. "We may have to sell the Northfields, dismiss half the staff. I cannot bear it, Arthur." Isabella, drawn by the commotion, entered the study. She took in the scene, the pale Duchess, the scattered papers, Arthur's furrowed brow, and stepped forward without hesitation. "Let me help," she said softly. Lady Eleanor looked up, skepticism warring with desperation. "What could you possibly do, Miss Marlowe?" Isabella's voice was steady. "I kept the household accounts in my father's vicarage. I know how to find waste and cut costs, and I can speak to the tenants, explain what is needed, reassure them. With your permission, of course." Arthur met his mother's eyes. "She is right. We need all the help we can muster." So began a week of ceaseless labor. Side by side, Isabella and Arthur pored over ledgers, tracing every penny that had vanished into the steward's pockets. Isabella identified extravagances that could be trimmed: a seldom-used carriage, imported delicacies for the kitchens, costly flowers for the drawing rooms. Arthur rode out to the farms, negotiating new terms with tenants and promising fair treatment if they stood by the estate. They worked late into the night, heads bent together over flickering candlelight. At times, exhaustion frayed their tempers, but never their bond. One night, as the rain lashed the windows, Isabella found Arthur slumped over a ledger, his face in his hands. She touched his shoulder gently. "You must rest, Arthur. You are doing all you can." He looked up, eyes shadowed with worry. "It is not enough. I fear I will lose everything, Ashcombe, my mother's trust, even you." She knelt beside him, her own fears forgotten. "You will not lose me. Not while I have breath to give you comfort." He caught her hand in his, holding it tightly. "Why do you do this? After all that has happened, after all I have asked of you." She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "Because I care for you. Because this place, these people, they matter to me." For a moment, the world shrank to the warmth of their clasped hands, the certainty that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Lady Eleanor, passing the open doorway, witnessed their quiet solidarity. She watched as Isabella soothed Arthur's doubts, as she organized the staff with gentle authority, as she comforted frightened tenants and brought order from chaos. The Duchess saw in her not an interloper, nor a fortune seeker, but a woman of fortitude and compassion, a woman worthy, perhaps, of a duke's heart. When the crisis finally eased and the estate's future was secured, if only for a time, Lady Eleanor summoned Isabella to her sitting room once more. "You have saved Ashcombe," the Duchess said quietly. "I could not have done so without you." Isabella lowered her gaze, humility softening her features. "I only did what was needed, Your Grace." Lady Eleanor studied her a long moment, then nodded. "Perhaps that is what I needed most of all. Someone who sees what is needed and does not flinch." A new respect settled between them, fragile but real. As Isabella left the room, she passed Arthur in the corridor. He caught her hand, his eyes alight with hope. "Stay with me, Isabella," he murmured, voice trembling. "Not as my governess, nor as my friend, but as the woman I love." Her heart leapt, but fear lingered. "If your mother truly sees me now, perhaps the world will too. But until she speaks, I cannot promise you everything." Arthur smiled, squeezing her hand. "I can wait, if waiting means there is hope." And for the first time, Isabella allowed herself to believe that hope might, indeed, be enough to carry them through what storms remained. For even as Ashcombe steadied itself, the world beyond its gates waited, with trials and joys yet to come. The morning after the storm that had nearly broken Ashcombe, the manor awoke with a hush that felt reverent, expectant. Isabella moved through the corridors with a new steadiness, her steps echoing softly on the polished wood. She was no longer the uncertain governess, but a woman who had earned her place through trials of heart and spirit. Yet the greatest test, the one that would expose her, Arthur, and Lady Eleanor to the world's scrutiny, still loomed ahead. It was Arthur who broke the silence first. He appeared in the schoolroom, sunlight pouring in behind him, his bearing more resolute than Isabella had ever seen. The children fell quiet, sensing a shift in the very air. Arthur's gaze sought Isabella, and in front of all assembled the children, the servants, and, unbeknownst to him, Lady Eleanor herself. Watching from the threshold, he spoke. "I have something to say," he began, his voice clear and unwavering. "There has been much talk at Ashcombe, much judgment, much expectation. I can no longer abide by silence or pretense. I wish all to know that my heart belongs to Miss Marlowe. She has shown me what it is to be truly noble, not by birth, but by character, by compassion, and by courage." A stunned hush settled over the room. The children's eyes went wide, and Mrs. Godwin pressed a hand to her mouth. Arthur moved closer to Isabella, offering his hand without hesitation. "I do not care for the whispers of society, nor for the boundaries set by old names and old money. I care only for honor, and I see more honor in you, Isabella, than in any drawing-room in London. If you will have me, I would make you my wife." The words, so boldly spoken, rang through the manor like a bell. Isabella felt her world tilt and right itself all at once. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Instead, she took Arthur's hand, her answer clear in her trembling smile. The servants, sensing the magnitude of the moment, began to whisper their blessings, and the children cheered, unburdened by the complexities of rank. Yet the day was not without its shadows. As word of Arthur's declaration rippled outward, the drawing-rooms of the county buzzed with outrage and disbelief. Letters arrived, some from distant relatives, others from old friends, each one a reminder of the world's rigid hierarchies and the price of defiance. Lady Eleanor received these missives with a calm face but sleepless eyes. She spent hours in her private chamber, pacing, reading and rereading Isabella's letters of recommendation, the household accounts, and most tellingly, her own memories of the young woman's trials. At last, she sent for Isabella. The summons came at dusk. Isabella entered Lady Eleanor's sitting room with her heart in her throat. The Duchess sat by the fire, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. For a long moment she did not speak. Then quietly she gestured for Isabella to sit. "You have been patient, Miss Marlowe. More patient than most in your position would have been." Isabella met her gaze, steady now. "I have tried only to be honest, Your Grace. I never wished to cause you pain." Lady Eleanor's eyes softened, a flicker of warmth melting the frost. "I believe you, and I owe you an explanation. Every test, every trial you endured, these were not born of cruelty, nor of prejudice alone. My family has suffered much at the hands of those who would use us for their own ends. I could not allow my son, nor Ashcombe, to be so endangered." She paused, her voice trembling for the first time. "You reminded me of myself long ago, determined, principled, unwilling to bend. But I needed to know beyond any doubt that your heart was true." Isabella's throat tightened. "I understand. And if I have passed, it is only because your son gave me strength." Lady Eleanor managed a small smile. "He is his father's son in that respect, stubborn to the last." She rose and crossed the room, her movements graceful but unhurried. "You have shown more fortitude, more integrity than many born to privilege. You have cared for my household, my tenants, and for Arthur, even when it cost you dearly." She took Isabella's hand in her own, a gesture both intimate and ceremonial. "You are no longer a guest at Ashcombe, nor a servant. You are family, Isabella. You are the woman I hoped my son would find, though I did not know it until now." Tears shimmered in Isabella's eyes, and for the first time she allowed them to fall. Lady Eleanor's embrace was brief, but it spoke more than words. Later that night, as the lamps burned low and the manor hummed with a new bright energy, Arthur found Isabella alone in the rose garden. He took her hands in his, joy and relief mingling in his eyes. "My mother accepts you," he said softly. "You are truly home." Isabella leaned into his touch, her heart full. "It was never Ashcombe I longed for, Arthur. It was you. But now, I think, I can belong to both." He drew her close, the future at last opening before them. Not a promise of ease, but of shared purpose and hard-won love. Yet beyond the hedges and candlelit windows, the world still turned, and the next dawn would bring new challenges for Isabella, Arthur, and the family she had finally, truly claimed as her own. The news swept through the county like a summer storm, unexpected, impossible to ignore. Ashcombe's heir, the Duke himself, was to marry Isabella Marlowe, the governess. Drawing rooms from London to the smallest village buzzed with disbelief, curiosity, and, in many quarters, open disapproval. Yet beneath the rising tide of gossip, an undercurrent of admiration flickered. For Arthur and Isabella had defied the iron laws of class and, in doing so, had claimed the right to shape their own destiny. At first, the letters arrived daily elegant, barbed notes from Lady Eleanor's oldest friends, full of carefully worded concern and thinly veiled warnings. My dear Eleanor, surely you will reconsider this most unorthodox match. Society is built upon the wisdom of tradition. One hopes Ashcombe will not suffer for a moment's folly. But Lady Eleanor, once the sternest guardian of these very traditions, had become Isabella's staunchest ally. She replied to each missive with dignified brevity. My son's happiness is my highest concern. Miss Marlowe has proven herself worthy of our name in ways that no title could guarantee. Word spread that the Duchess herself had silenced Lady Westbridge at a dinner party with a single frosty glance. The story was told and retold, how Lady Eleanor, regal and unyielding, had declared, "There is no higher distinction than honor, and Miss Marlowe has it in abundance." Isabella, meanwhile, bore the last whispers of censure with quiet grace. She sensed the lingering stares at the market, the hesitant courtesies at church, but she no longer shrank from them. She walked with her head high, her eyes alight, the children at her side. Each day, she found Lady Eleanor waiting for her in the morning room, sometimes with a question about the estate, sometimes with a cup of tea, and a wry observation about the latest gossip. Their relationship, once defined by tests and wary silences, blossomed into genuine respect. It began with shared work. Isabella's efficient accounts, Lady Eleanor's vast experience, both focused now on securing Ashcombe's future. It grew with small confidences, a memory of Eleanor's youth, a joke about the foibles of their neighbors, a quiet moment by the fire after supper. Affection, once unthinkable, bloomed in the gentle teasing and in the comfort of unspoken understanding. One evening, as Isabella finished reading aloud to Lady Eleanor, the Duchess set aside her embroidery and regarded her with a rare, unguarded warmth. "You have changed this house, Isabella," she said, "and I suspect you have changed me." Isabella smiled, her eyes shining. "Perhaps we have changed one another, Your Grace." Arthur, for his part, carried himself with a newfound ease. He walked the estate with Isabella at his side, greeting tenants and villagers, never hiding his affection. He spoke openly of their plans for Ashcombe, of reforms and improvements that would honor both his family's legacy and Isabella's ideals. The people who had once whispered now nodded in respect, their wariness giving way to genuine admiration. The day of the wedding dawned with a bright, forgiving sun. There was no grand procession, no parade of titled guests from London. Instead, the ceremony was held in the small chapel on the edge of the estate, its stone walls draped in wildflowers, gathered by the children Isabella had taught and cherished. Lady Eleanor herself led Isabella down the aisle. As they paused at the chapel door, the Duchess squeezed Isabella's hand, her voice low and proud. "You walk in as my equal, Isabella. Never doubt it." Inside, Arthur waited at the altar, his gaze steady, his love for Isabella written in every line of his face. The ceremony was simple, just family, the closest friends, the servants who had become kin. When Isabella spoke her vows, her voice did not tremble. She saw, in Arthur's eyes, the promise of a life built not on duty or expectation, but on shared hope and hard-won trust. Afterward, the celebration spilled onto the lawn. Laughter rang beneath the ancient oaks, music rose from fiddles and flutes, and the villagers mingled with the gentry, boundaries dissolving in the golden afternoon. Lady Eleanor, glass in hand, watched the couple with a smile both wistful and proud. Mrs. Godwin approached Isabella as the sun began to set, pressing her hand with quiet affection. You have given Ashcombe a future, miss. No, my lady. Isabella embraced her, her heart full to bursting. We have all done it together. Arthur found her as twilight deepened, leading her away from the crowd to the rose garden that had witnessed so much of their journey. He took her hands, his voice soft with wonder. We have come so far, Isabella. I can scarcely believe it. She smiled, tears bright in her eyes. Nor I, but I would not change a single moment. Not if it led me here. He kissed her then, beneath the arch of blooming roses, sealing not just a promise but a new beginning for themselves, for Ashcombe, for all who had watched and doubted, and at last believed. As night fell over the manor, and the last lanterns flickered out, Isabella and Arthur stood side by side, ready to shape the world anew. Their love a quiet revolution, their union the dawn of a brighter era for Ashcombe.